Welcome back, everyone, to Open Line. Glad you're with us tonight. We are speaking with the executive director of the ACLU in Tennessee, Hedy Weinberg, joining us there via Zoom. And we've been talking about a lawsuit that was just filed against the state by ACLU involving this bathroom signage law that goes into effect tomorrow. I'm going to pivot now, and we can talk about some other things the legislature is considering. What are some other things you're kind of watching there with the ACLU that our legislator here in Tennessee has been considering?
That's great. And so folks should know we're in the 112th Tennessee General Assembly, and it's a two-year session. So we just completed the first session, 2021, and then when they return in January, it will be the second and final session of the 112th Tennessee General Assembly. And I say that because there were some really brutal, terrible bills introduced. We talked about some of them right now, the anti-LGBT bills. But there were also some positive legislative initiatives, and I think that's important to speak to and to lift up. And there were a couple bills introduced that would attempt to reform the money bail system. In Tennessee, I don't know how many people are familiar with money bail, but basically when you're arrested and brought to jail, you have the opportunity, unless you're a flight risk, or a danger to yourself or others, you have the opportunity to post bail. But when you post bail, that means that you either put down cash bail that you have or your family member has, or you go to a bail bonds person and you have to give them 10% of whatever bail is. And the recognition that is sometimes lost in people is that system favors the wealthy. The poor, those without that kind of savings, are unable to bond out, or their families are not able to bond them out, which means an individual can sit pre-trial. Remember, that person is still considered innocent and is innocent until they have the trial or plead. So that individual is sitting pre-trial in jail. Sitting in pre-trial in jail means that there are all sorts of collateral consequences. It means that the individual is kept from their family, kept from their kids. If they're in school, obviously school is disrupted. If they have a job, they lose their job. They can't meet and work with their attorneys. So there are a lot of collateral consequences that affect them later. And I think data and research shows that, in fact, many of these folks end up being convicted or plead because staying in jail pre-trial is not pleasant. Senator Hale and I think Representative Curcio, Senator Hale is from Sumner County, Representative Curcio is from Dixon, if I'm not mistaken. They have introduced two bills that really would begin to move us toward reforming the money bail system. And there will be a summer study, though it might not be till early fall, September, but there will be a summer study with legislators from certainly the Senate Judiciary Committee, if not also the House Judiciary Committee, and they will get together and explore, what's happening with money bail in our state. We've done ACLU. There are a number of organizations working in this area. There's a National Bail Fund group here, and there's a group out of Memphis who actually help individuals. They put up bail for individuals if they don't have the money themselves, and if they don't want to, which is understandable, work sometimes with bail bonds companies, because again, the bail bond company keeps a portion of that money. But it will be really important to watch what's happening at the Summer Study Committee and to recognize that the money bail system really favors the wealthy, that there is no evidence to indicate that money, putting up your bail, is what brings you back to court. In fact, it's been very clear that as long as individuals are reminded, sometimes by their grandmother or their partner, or just getting their own text that they are due in court, that individual shows up. So money is not what really drives people to return to court, and yet that's a system that's been in place for so long that people have gotten used to it and assume that if you get rid of money bail, you will have people not choosing to go back to court when it's their time for a date.
It's interesting you're saying that is a positive bill. And so that the fact that it is a bill and it's being discussed, it must mean that there must be bipartisan support, right? I mean, there are Republicans that are on board with reforming this.
Both Senator Hale and Chairman Curcio are Republicans, and it's exciting that they're pursuing this. I think, you know, when you start to watch the last couple of years, what's happened with the criminal justice system, and that this is a bipartisan, these are bipartisan initiatives. I mean, Americans for Prosperity, Beacon Center is libertarian, Americans for Prosperity comes out of the Koch brothers group. We work hand in hand with them. And then there are some amazing grassroots groups, Free Hearts, the National Bail Funds, who are Just City, who are all working in this area. So it is a very broad, diverse coalition with the understanding that our criminal justice system costs a whole lot of money, and we are not doing anything to support and enhance public safety, and we're spending lots of tax dollars rather than recognizing that a lot of people end up in jail because of the criminalization poverty issue, which is what we were speaking about, the fines and fees that no one can pay, and then they're sent to jail. The fact that when people have substance abuse, and we're seeing it all over the rural areas, the opiate addiction issue, those folks going to jail is not going to prison if they're charged with a felony. That's not changing the landscape. That's not protecting people from serving time and then re-entering and not having opportunities or treatment centers. So there's a lot of important work happening on both sides of the aisle, and we just have to keep that drumbeat going. And I'm delighted that that Senator Hale and Representative Curcio are pursuing this.
So you sound pretty optimistic. I mean, you sound like that could happen next session. Something could happen.
I don't know about that. I think they have great sponsors, and I think that the bail bond industry is going to be very aggressive in their opposition. But I think from what we know, because we've been working in rural communities, there are so many stories to hear from people who have suffered the consequences from their loved ones being held pre-trial. And there's no reason for it. I mean, that's the best evidence that people return to court without money bail. There's something, in fact, the irony is that in our law currently, but it's not being played out that way, there's what's called ROR, release on recognizance. And basically people are supposed to be released on their recognizance so that they don't have to stay in jail waiting trial. That's the first choice. And yet, unfortunately, a lot of magistrates or judges who are the ones making these decisions are too quick to require bail. One only needs to look actually at bail bonds companies and the association and to see that they support a lot of, they provide a lot of campaign finance to elected officials, including judges. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot to learn, and I just urge people to start doing more research on that, to recognize that the bail is not making us safer, and it's not, and it's very discriminatory when it comes to people living in rural communities and who have limited incomes and resources.
That's a fascinating and important issue. We've done a couple of things on that on Open Line. We'll continue to follow that. That's a big issue. And we've seen it in other parts of the country too. Other states are doing some things. There is some movement all over on that.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. The other thing you're following is voting. Is that right? There's some voting bills. Maybe those aren't as positive, or what's the situation with those?
It will be interesting to see what is introduced next year in the legislature, because they introduce additional bills. The bills from 2021, those that weren't acted on stay alive, like the bail bonds bill, bail bills. But there's also an opportunity for legislators to introduce a number of more bills. We this year were very fortunate that our legislature did not, there were some bills introduced, but they didn't move forward. We were not like Georgia. I mean, if you watch what happened in Georgia, they just slam dunked and unfortunately successfully voted on bills that suppressed the vote, and supported obviously by the governor and others. And there were some national calls for the passage, as we have joined in. to pass the John Lewis Act, which would protect individuals across the country and ensure that they have access to the ballot box. One area that's really important to recognize and think about, and it's part of the criminal justice initiatives we're involved in as well as a number of other organizations. Free Hearts is doing some really cool work in this area, is to ensure that people with felony convictions who have served their time and are out of prison can have their rights restored prior to paying back all their fines, fees, and again, here's a first for Tennessee, requirement that they be current in child support. And so again, this is a bill, and our goal is to ensure that the re-entry process for people who are leaving prison, who have had felony convictions, that the re-entry process is eased by ensuring that individuals get their voice back. Your vote is your voice, and ensuring that individuals who have lost their voting rights, have been disenfranchised, and in this state it's over 350,000, that those folks can vote prior to paying back their court fines and fees and being current in child support. This is not about individuals no longer being required to pay back those fines and fees. It's about ensuring, though, that that is not what keeps them from voting.
All right, very good. Okay, we will take a break, come back for a final word with Hedy Weinberg. Be back right after this.